podcast from the grassroots, connecting people and sharing ideas.
Hey, this is Arlene and you're listening to ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Of course, today we are going to discuss about a book. The book is quite controversial. It's about in relation with the discussion about this word called Allah, which is the name of God. Of course, I'm talking about the book that was written by Dr. Azly Rahman. It's called Who Owns Allah? In Malay, it would be called what, Dr. Azly?
It's a kalimah Allah milik siapa.
So just a bit of introduction about yourself. You are an academician, author, and columnist. And just a short background introduction about you growing up in Johor Bahru, holding a Columbia University or New York City doctorate in international education development and master's degrees in 4 areas: education, international affairs, peace studies, and communication. And Dr. Azly Rahmat has taught more than 40 courses in 6 different departments and has written more than 350 analyses on Malaysia. His teaching experience in Malaysia and the United States spans over a wide range of subjects, from elementary to graduate education. And he has edited and authored 6 books, namely Multi-Ethnic Malaysia, Past, Present and Future, which was authored in 2009, Thesis on Cyberjaya, Hegemony and Utopianism in Southeast Asian State, authored in 2012, and of course the Allah Controversy and Other Essays on Malaysian Hypermodernity last year in 2013, and a first Malay publication which will be discussed in English, unfortunately. It's called Kalimah Allah milik siapa, or Who Owns the word of Who Owns Allah. So what prompted you to talk about religion, especially to talk about the Allah controversy, Dr. Azly?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. This is wonderful radio station. It's particularly focusing on one of my favorite areas, which is ASEAN. Okay, back to the book. What prompted me to write this?
Mm-hmm.
It's it's translated in Malay, wonderfully translated by Pauline Fan, and published by Gerak Budaya. And what prompted me to write is because it's a combination of 2 books, my earlier books, and I think that this topic is so not controversial, but so much that need to be understood in terms of what are the consequences of the controversies surrounding it. As we know that every day in the news is always about protests, this and that, revolving around this word. And especially particularly in Southeast Asia, as you know, the influence of radical, fundamental, whatever religion that's using religion, and this is why I'm interested in writing and talking about this book.
Mm-hmm. So, an obvious question: who owns Allah?
Yeah. All right, that's a very interesting question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I'm not here to give any answers because I don't have any answers, but I have some perspective for us to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, the question is that nobody owns Allah, the word Allah. Number 2, everybody owns the word Allah, and somebody owns the word Allah. Once to monopolize it. So. Basically, I'm not answering your question.
I see. I want to know, like, the controversy, the Allah controversy. How had it changed you in terms of the way you see Malaysian politics? Because in the past, the Malaysian politics has always been geared towards, racial sort of divide. But in terms of religion, it has becoming probably a central role, especially in these few decades.
Okay, good question. growing up in the 1970s in Johor Bahru and spending time right up to 1980s and 90s in Malaysia, this didn't seem to be a controversy at all. It's as if this is a manufactured crisis, produced and now is out of control. And I see this as particularly a Malaysian problem. And as you know, that no other country, no other society that has, the spiritual dimension of this, this issue is not something that blows out of proportion. So we're all trying to understand why.
So you wrote, your book, your initial book was, which was produced last year, the Unlock Controversy. It was in English, but the one that you currently publish, which is in Malay, why you want it to be translated in Malay? Have you gotten the feedback that you wanted from the Malay community on this?
Yes. No, I've not gotten feedback yet, but I wanted so much for my writings to be accessible to the Malay-speaking, people. This is why I found it necessary to have the book be accessible to especially policymakers, academicians, and people who debate this on at the policy level. And I think this is something that also necessary for students in university to understand this difficult dialogue. That's why.
Why do you think this is happening? Because early on you say it's a uniquely Malaysian problem. Why do you think this is happening to Malaysia only? What's so significant about the politics of religion, especially the name of God?
Okay, this is a very characteristic of a plural society. The politics in a plural society. And the reason why I use the word hyper-modernity is because we are modernized. We think that we are modernized, but we are hyper-modernized. Meaning that there's not enough maturity and in the way we modernize, and everything is getting out of control, it seems, these days. And because Malaysia is one example of a country in the world that we can study the dynamics of race relation and also the composition of the religious and racial groups, prompts us to see what are the impacts of modernization and neocolonialism, for example. And one of the impact today, it's not just Malaysia but all over the world, is and the rise of religious fundamentalism and to the extreme of violence, as you see that in the influence of ISIS, even in Southeast Asia. That we'll probably talk. We'll talk a little bit about the influence of ISIS in Southeast Asia.
In terms of right-wing groups, especially in Malaysia, you see ISMA, Perkasa, and all that. Of course, they are an easy target for us to, for ridicule. But at the same time, the emergence of extreme right-wing or far right-wing groups are not uniquely a Malaysian thing, because if you look at Europe, you look at the US, the Tea Party, for example, and a lot of other countries, there is like a global re-emergence of far right-wing ideology or movement. It can be based on religion, it can be based on race, or based on certain ideologies that they hold strong to. Why this is happening at this time? Because you mentioned the word hyper-modernity. So is it a unique problem of today's modern society? And what do they feel?
Oh yes, this is the speeding up, the impact of the speeding up of globalization. With those studying international relations might be, what might have read Ben Barber's Jihad versus McWall. And when ideological influence become and mesh with religious idealism, and everything becomes a supra-nationalist movement. That means the nation state no longer is important. What is important is to come up to the whole concept of, in Islam, for example, the concept of ummah, for example, the waiting for the Khalifa, for example. And if you will, it also, if you combine with the politics of the Middle East and the politics of United States foreign policy and Russia, and also the influence of China, we have a new game being played in the theater of world politics, and that's why we're seeing the transnational movement of terrorism. So that's I hope that answers a little bit of your question.
Coming back to the Allah controversy, do you think for organization like Perkasa, ISMA, and a few little mullah Napoleon in our country, the reason why they are emphasizing so much on Allah should be the ownership of just one religious group or ethnic group, do you think it's because, the underlying reason is because of globalization? There's a fear that their religion or their race will be somehow taken over or being changed into a kind of society that they don't envision themselves going towards.
This is a good question again. This is the excesses of modernization, in the sense that a lot of the things that's happening today ideologically is actually a consequence of alienation, right? Alienation, economic, whether it's economic, whether it's cultural, whether it's educational alienation. And we don't know how to for example, a nation must understand the transcultural flow of ideas. What brings certain ideas quickly into the country, and how is that country and society impacted by these changes? For example, do we understand how to differentiate between religion and culture? For example, in the process of Islamization, which started in the 1980s, for example, in 30 years, in a span of 30 years, what has happened? And if you look at against the backdrop of modernization, then you can understand that there are certain groups that are feeling that they are alienated and left behind in the process. And one way to ask themselves is that, why is this happening, and how am I going to respond to this? How is my group going to respond to this? And what's the mechanism I'm going to be using to respond to this? And what will be the ideological basis? And here comes religion as race and religion as two very strong forces of protest. And I think this can go out of hand, and I think this is what we're seeing now.
When you say alienation, I would assume one of the element of alienation would be economic alienation. But you see, in the past, during Mahathir's time, the rhetoric of poor Malay, rich Chinese, and with his book on the Malay dilemma, focuses more on the ethnic disparity between, socio-economic disparity between different ethnic groups. But fast forward to today's sort of, I would say, dilemma between different races. It has moved from, a race sort of disparity towards a religious empowerment towards this community to somehow either protect or empower them to say that, hey, we are the owners of this land, so we should own, either the name of Allah or economic ownership of certain things, or even in terms of special rights. Do you see there is a differentiation in terms of how the kind of identity formation of the Malay community have changed since Mahathir's time to Najib's time of today?
Oh, that's a very complicated question, Arlene. During the time Mahathir, also Mahathirism, we can see 1980s there are three policies with Malaysia Incorporated, privatization, and also the Look East policy. And for 22 years of his rule, and up to now, our economic paradigm, our economic model has been based on neoliberalism and capitalism, which does not really trickle down. There's always a very strange mix of capitalism and the welfare state. What is in fact happening now is actually what's happening in the United States and many countries as well, the concentration of wealth to the few, and more of the expanding middle class, middle income trap, middle class, and growing population of the poor. And this is a structure of alienation, and that goes the same, along the same line with the dehumanization, excessive industrialization, and remember that we have now 28 million people as population. And there will be ways by which groups that are alienated will find avenues for protests. And it's like we can't see who the enemy is in front of us, but we can see who's the closest, that we can blame. And in the age of globalization and pluralism, we are often looking at race and religion as the two avenues that the poor and also the dispossessed will find as a platform for protest, although they can see, for example, what's the role of the multinational corporation? What's the role of the elite in the country? What's the role of those people who owns assets in other countries? So in the end, the war is between the people who do not really understand the whole structure, the system, and it becomes uglier and uglier because there's a difference. There's an issue of illusion of knowledge, and also again manufactured crisis, and in fact propaganda being played up.
So do you think there is very little, I would say, either support or focus on the moderate Malays? Because I think probably you would know the 25 prominent Malays who are giving their support for moderate Islam. Do you think this is a good way to somehow put the issue on the center rather than pushing it to extreme far right or far left?
My thought today is the country can only move forward with a radical restructuring of the education system, with the going back to the Constitution, defending the Constitution, and also using the Constitution as a supreme law of the land, and to bring in strong liberalism into the public discourse, and to control the excesses of disabling cultures from moving forward and mutating. At the same time, to look at three areas in the nation development, which is the culture, economy, and education.
So
what are we strengthening? Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So in essence, you're saying that the Allah controversy is not really a religious problem. It's actually a structural problem, especially to fix the political structure of this nation. Would that be the case?
Yes, it's a manufactured crisis. Like I said earlier, that is an illusion. We think that it is a problem, but it is not the problem. Problem is political economy, education, and also the inability to understand the different cultural philosophies of the people of Malaysia, and to bring all these philosophies into the mainstream education system, and also to totally re-engineer the education. That's I think the only way to do it. How we do it, we have politicians. We have.
There's another way to discuss. So are you also saying that to fix the problem of the Allah controversy is not to have more religious discourse, but actually to really have a policy reflection, a reflection of our own policy and other structural problems that we have in this country, and address it directly? Is that the case?
It's a very long process, and to be able to have dialogues is good as a very long, short-term and long-term strategy. But more importantly is that what are we doing with our next generation? What are we doing with having a common education system, a very strong enough philosophy of education to be guiding the nation to the next 20, 50 years, for example, and to really fix our education system so that 28 million people and the children of the 28 million, that's millions of children in future will be able to go into one school system and be able to understand how to appreciate each other.
So you are
yes.
So you are in support of the one school system, as in like in terms of public education.
Yes, with one condition that essentially the schools should be gradually turned into all English medium schools. Even religion ought to be taught in English.
I see. But wouldn't this intensify the alienation that the Malay community would feel, because language is essentially part of their identity?
We're not saying that we eliminate language. No, all languages must be taught because they are the rights of the child to their own language. Why not have the children be instructed in the native language from right up to standard 6? And then when you go to high school or secondary school, then schools will be in English. And the only things that are not taught in English will be Bahasa Melayu. And we are going to have a very good next generation of people, not only literate in English language, but also literate in their own native language, be able to sustain the understanding of what is happening to the society. Because not just English is the lingua franca, but also a lot of other things that is people are against liberalism and democracy lies in not understanding these philosophies. So,
So in essence, I mean, Malaysians are a religious society. Unfortunately, that's the reality that we have here, and it's not really a bad thing, and it's not really a good thing. It's just that it can. Many times politicians would use religion as the source of their way to gain more either popularity or power. In essence, my question to you when it comes to the Allah controversy, for you emphasize a lot on the learning of philosophy, and unfortunately philosophy is not really something that is being taught either in primary or high school or even in university level. So how can we move forward, at least for right now, in terms of addressing issues related to the kind of structural problems that we have here?
Right now we must teach philosophy in our universities. There is no other way of doing that. We must teach very basic at the foundation level, philosophy, anthropology, sociology, and everything. And also Malaysian studies from a very multicultural perspective. Without all this foundation, I don't know what's going to happen next for the next 5, 10, 15 years. We do not have a common core. We don't have a very strong enough foundation in humanities. That's why we are messed up as a society now.
So I guess more people would probably migrate overseas if like that.
No, we do not need to. No, we do not need to migrate. It's a beautiful country. What we need to do is that fix the education system by educating in this generation, by reintroducing a very strong liberal democracy discourse, and also by strengthening the core foundations in the universities especially. And then we need to train our teachers and help them educate our next generation into the best possible ways, the most humane, and also in education that can help them understand each other. And I think this requires very radical changes, including also at the policy level.
What about
people running the policies?
What about fixing the economy? Because you say part of the problem is the concentration of wealth and also globalization.
Right. What is the economic paradigm that's governing our country? That's the problem. Do we only have one? Do we only know one model? Are we sustaining the economy that prioritize only consumptions that are very conspicuous consumption? Are we emphasizing on consumer spending? Are we emphasizing on materials? or are we going to be looking at different kinds of way that we can change our economic ideology? And again, in the long run, are we creating human beings who are merely consumers and capitalists, or even people who accumulate wealth at the expense of the people who are poor? And all these things become like a butterfly effect. One thing leads to another, and in the long run, everything will eat up and also will destroy the entire fabric of the country. And it gets worse when you have more and more people in the country. Mm-hmm. And another thing is that where are we going in terms of education, and how are we preserving our cultures that has a very strong foundation in philosophy? So we don't need to migrate. We need to really go back to the drawing board. Mm-hmm. And that like you and I, we don't know how to do it, but we know that these are possible ways by which we can save the country from totally becoming a failed state.
Mm-hmm. With that, thank you very much, Dr. Azly Rahman. Thanks for sharing your views.
Thank you so much, Arlene, and thank you, Durian ASEAN, for the interview.